Settle in and let your breathing slow. Tonight we're not chasing the noise of battles or the shine of bronze on a parade ground. We're going to walk quietly beside an ordinary Roman legionary and live one long, unhurried day at his pace. The scenes are patient, the sounds are small, leather creaking, sandals tapping grit, the soft hiss of water poured into a cup. You'll hear the steady rhythm that held the empire together, not triumph, but repetition, not speeches, but habits. Imagine a grey band of dawn along a low horizon. The camp is a geometry of canvas and stake, neat lines that looked the same yesterday and will look the same tomorrow. A whistle will sound once. There won't be a speech. Men will rise, reach for kit by memory, and begin another measured stretch of hours. We will move with them step by step, weight by weight, without hurry. If you stay awake, you'll learn what the Legion actually asked of a body. If you drift off, the march can carry you, steady as a metronome, from first light to the soft blue of evening. When you're ready, lift the flap of the tent with your fingertips. Feel the cool air on your face. The day is waiting. The first thing you notice is the air. It carries cold from the ground and a faint smell of last night's hearths. Smoke thinned by distance, a little sour from damp wood, softened by the odor of flour, dust and leather. The tent is dark except for the seam of dawn along the flap. You lie still for one more breath, listening. Outside, someone clears a throat softly. A metal cup kisses a stone with a hollow ring. A mule gives a single, tired snort. Then silence settles again, a kind of quiet that means everyone is awake and no one is talking. Your hand finds the strap of the marching pack. It's a tidy bundle, tied to a wooden crossframe that will lean against your spine. Inside, a folded cloak, a spare tunic, a length of cord, your sewing kit, a small knife, a cup, a cooking pot, a handful of nails, and the personal odds and ends that make a day feel manageable: a strip of cloth for blisters, a sliver of soap, a twist of salt wrapped in leather. On the frame hang the heavier necessities: a bundle of tent stakes, a share of the tent canvas if it's your turn to carry it, and the iron head of a shovel that remembers every ditch you've cut. It all looks reasonable until you pick it up, and then you remember why shoulders learn to complain without speaking. You sit and pull on sandals, caligae soles studded with hobnails that flash in low light like a scatter of dull stars. The leather is stiff where it must be and soft where it rubs. Laces cross your instep, wrap your ankle, and finish in a knot you can make in the dark. Your feet know the promise these shoes make. They will last, but they will also tell the truth about every mile. You slip your belt through its familiar path and hang the dagger Pugio where your hand will always find it. The sword Gladius rests in its scabbard, quiet and heavier in the mind than on the belt. You reach for the shield. It is bigger than people remember, curved to hug you, canvas stretched over wood, and painted with the emblem of your unit. The rim is scarred where the world has tried to teach lessons. The boss at the center is a round, hammered answer to things that come forward too quickly. You test the grip, flex your fingers, and set the shield down within arm's reach again. The spear pilum leans in the corner. It looks simple until you notice how the metal neck narrows, meant to bend after it strikes, so it cannot be thrown back. Someone clever thought of that, and you thank him each time you carry the weight. A soft shuffle outside. The Optio, the centurion's second, passes down the lane between tents, counting under his breath. He doesn't need to raise his voice. The camp is trained to the small sounds that move a day. In the next tent, a lad mutters about a missing sock. His partner laughs without humor and hands him one that doesn't match. The flap lifts and cool air slips in like water. You eat without ceremony. A chunk of bread that tastes of stone and grain. A sip of water cut with vinegar posca that wakes the mouth and gentles the stomach. The cup is tinny and dense along the rim where it has met too many mornings. You pour a little more and share. Someone says thanks without making a shape of it. The tent closes around the sound and gives it back to you as if the canvas were a kind of friend. When the whistle sounds, it is hardly louder than a butt call. Men move. There is no rush and no delay, only the practiced sliding of actions into place. Packs on, straps tugged, tent poles down, canvas folded, stakes counted. The ground appears as a neat square of flattened grass where your lives just were. The square is the point. A Roman camp promises the earth that it will be left in a shape that can be lived in again. You step into the lane, fall into file with your contubernate men who share this patch of world with you, then into the larger rhythm of the century and the cohort beyond it. The road waits just beyond the ditch. You feel the weight of kit settle into the spots you've taught it to use. Someone adjusts a strap. Someone scratches a knee through wool. You look once toward the horizon and then stop looking. Staring at distance makes distance bigger. A second whistle, the column leans forward. The day begins. Feet become a clock, hill ball, grit. The nails in your sandals speak to the stones in the road with tiny, regular sparks under the skin of sound. Dust rises when the sun climbs. Until then, the world feels clean, edged, and willing. Your breath lines up with the cadence, your thoughts slow to match it. The first mile is a negotiation. The pack asks your shoulders if they remember. Your shoulders answer with a grumble and then settle. The belt finds its place over the hip bone. The gladius stops knocking your thigh because you changed your stride the way you always do. The shield rides the outside of your body and catches a low wind like a sail that has learned obedience. You do not speak, not because it's forbidden, but because mornings like words to arrive only when necessary. The centurion rides the flank at a walk, not a parade-esque pace, but the pace of a man who has learned how long a horse wants to be useful. He watches feet, not faces. Feet tell the truth about fatigue long before eyes admit it. He nods once to the optio, who slips back along the line to straighten a gap before it grows into a problem. Nothing dramatic happens, which is the Legion's favorite kind of success. When the sun has lifted to the height of a man's shoulder, the column halts without jolting. The signal is a hand moved in a small circle. You drop the pack in a way that saves your back from a shock and your frame from a crack. The world rushes in, relief at the wings, warmth along the spine. The sweet argument between thirst and discipline as you count swallows from the skin. A boy from the baggage train passes with a basket of coarse figs that someone bought dear. You trade a nail for one. The kind of economy that keeps friends close. The fruit tastes of dust and sugar and makes the next mile feel half as long. Repair hour comes next. The youngest men squatting along the ditch to prod at soles and lace. Veterans leaning one hip against shield rims while they rub a little oil into leather straps. A pilum head gets tightened, a seam caught with 3 quick stitches that make the difference between a blister and a story. The optio pretends not to see a man setting a thin sliver of wool under a sandal strap. The optio knows that comfort is disciplined by another name. Back on the road, the sounds change as heat climbs. Armor creaks more, leather takes on a lower note, and the shield knocks a little when the ground ripples. Smells change too, sage and crushed grass near ditches. A hint of pitch where a cart passed yesterday, the honest animal smell of the mule train ahead. Somewhere far off a stream keeps saying yes to gravity. You begin to think in smaller distances, one stand of trees, one bend, the third milestone after this one. The Empire has scattered these stones along the road so that minds can hang goals on them like laundry on a line. When the halt for the midday ration comes, the camp does not appear. Instead, men become a camp where they stand. Bread, a strip of cured pork for those on favored lists today. A cup of posca that tastes better than it sounds. You sit on the pack frame and let your legs throb while your mouth occupies your mind. Bits of conversation appear and fade like swallows. A letter promised, a dice game owed, a story about a woman in a town whose name no one pronounces right. Then silence again, the kind that means sleep would be welcome if time agreed. Sometimes a message arrives on the road. A courier overtakes the column. The centurion reads, and nothing seems to change except the angle of his head for a breath. You do not know the contents, you do not need to. The line moves 5 minutes later with the same cadence. The Empire runs on many kinds of knowledge. Yours is the knowledge of feet. By mid-afternoon, the light has a worn softness. Sweat dries into salt at the temples. The pack feels less like weight and more like a fact. The men in front of you are now just shapes you enjoy not walking through. When the column finally turns off the road toward a piece of pale ground that looks exactly like 100 others, your body feels the answer move through it. Here, the place itself does not matter. What matters is what you will make of it. The orders come quietly. Stakes, ditch, street. The camp will be a square again, or close enough to comfort God and engineers alike. The contubernia peel off to their assigned slice of the grid. Shovels bite earth with a rhythm teeth recognize. The soil tells its story as it opens. Dry sand that likes to behave, or sticky clay that insists on joining the shovel and must be persuaded otherwise with a knock against the boot. A shallow ditch appears where there was only guesswork. A low embankment grows from what the ditch surrenders, and the edge of safety begins to take shape. You set the tent with hands that learned long ago how to do it in rain, wind, and dark. Doing it in good weather feels like permission to smile. 2 men hold the center pole, to stretch the canvas, to set stakes at a tidy angle, and to thread the lines and pull until the fabric speaks in a lower voice. The seam points toward the street the way habit teaches. Inside, the ground cloth gets smoothed with the flat of a palm. Outside, you ring the front with a small tidy trench to teach water where you want it to go if the sky changes its mind in the night. Fire comes next, not a blaze, but a cooking flame. 3 stones, a nest of twigs, larger sticks added when the first breath becomes a tongue. The pot hangs, the water moves, and the first smell of something better than dry bread lifts the spirit of the lane. Tonight it's lentils with onion and a little pork, just enough to tell the mouth that life has texture. A handful of greens goes in at the end bitter in a way that wakes the tongue. Someone sings one line of a marching song and stops because finishing it would be work. Gear gets its hour of kindness. The shield gets wiped where sweat soaked the rim. The iron of the pilum drinks a breath of oil. The sword comes free just far enough to let air speak to the scabbard. Sandals are turned over and checked, nails counted like sheep. A strip of cloth finds a hot spot on a heel and makes a promise. The pack frame sighs when it is finally leaned against the pole with nothing hanging from it. You run a thumb along a strap and feel where it wants beeswax tomorrow. Letters appear. Some men write, some dictate, some only hold the stylus and draw lines the way a child might trace a road in dust. Content to let the act stand in for the message. A few wooden writing tablets pass from hand to hand, their wax smoothed with a warm blade to become night again. Someone reads aloud a piece of a letter he received last week. It's about bread in a market and a nephew who learned to whistle. He reads it as if it were law. In a way, it is law of the heart that tells men why miles are worth trading for years. The centurion walks the street once more, not to find fault but to confirm care. He notes a line that needs tightening, a fire banked too high near canvas, a ditch that should be widened if rain decides to visit. He says good more often than he says anything else. When he stops at your tent, he looks at your sandals and asks about the blister you didn't mention. You say it's fine. He looks at your eyes instead of your mouth and tells you to rest the foot tomorrow's first mile and then decide. The Empire does not need heroes at mile 1. It needs men at mile 30. Evening makes a shape you enjoy looking at. For tents facing 4 tents across a tidy lane, a cooking smell that feels like a friend's house, the dark outline of packs that mean a roof will be there after you sleep. Stars find their old places, a mule coughs, then gives up. The last cup of posca tastes kind in the throat. You sit on the ground with your back to the pack frame and let the day drain from your shoulders into the earth, which receives it without comment. Before sleep, you walk 10 paces beyond the ditch and stand still. The night answers with small lives, a bird you cannot name, insects with a sense of business, the long hush of wind remembering a river. Behind you the camp breathes like a single chest. You think of nothing useful, which is a skill you had to learn. When you return, the tent flap moves as if it is greeting you. You lie down on the ground cloth, pull the cloak over your shoulders and listen to silence finish its sentence. The day you lived will repeat. It is not a failure that it repeats. Repetition is the Legion's craft. Miles become lines on a map. Lines become roads hold people together who would otherwise drift. You close your eyes, feeling the small ache of a shoulder that carried the world fairly, and you let the ache be the last true thing you notice. Sleep is not victory. Sleep is a tool. You use it well. Tomorrow, the whistle will sound once, and you will begin again one heel, one breath, one quiet promise at a time. The year turns quietly, like a door that has learned not to squeak. Winter thins into pale mornings, and the ground gives up its frost with small, dark sighs. You stand in a courtyard that smells of damp timber and charcoal, your cloak folded over your arm. The centurion reads names from a wax tablet, the stylus tapping gently between each. When he reaches yours, you step forward, place your right hand on a book bound in leather and repeat words you have said before. To obey orders, to keep faith, to guard the standards, to stand firm in line, and to return when sent no drama, only clarity. The oath is shorter than memory. Its weight is longer. Afterward, the morning draws you into its tidy tasks. Sandals are inspected on a bench under the eaves. The optio checks the nails in each sole, not to scold but to save a month of blisters. A clerk opens a small chest and issues thread, needles, and a twist of wax for ceiling seams. A pile of shields waits with fresh paint drying to a soft mat. You slide your hand along a rim and feel where canvas meets wood and believes it. A pile of new peeler leans near the smithy. The smith explains in a voice like gravel that the iron shank narrows to bend on purpose. A young recruit nods as if this is a trick. You nod as if it is a kindness. Spring is a season of measuring. The quartermaster measures grain into sacks. So much for mess 1, so much for mess 2. The ration clerk measures salt by finger and habit. The medical orderly measures bandage rolls and sets aside those that have lost their edges to too many hurried hands. You measure your pack with your back, cloak, kit, stakes, shovel, pot, cup, the small hoard of private necessities that make you yourself an extra leather thong, a chip of pumice for smoothing a hot spot, a folded tablet already dark with notes. Training returns as if it never left. The parade ground is firmer now. Boots bite and hold. The first week is for rhythm. 2 hours each morning of marching at a pace that sets conversation aside. Your breath learns to be a metronome again. The second week is for drills. Shield to shield work with short steps and shorter blades. Practiced on blunted iron that teaches touch before it teaches edge. The third week is for tools. Digging ditches on one side of the field, while another sentry fills them, proving to arms and back that the earth will yield if asked with patience and leverage. The shovel becomes an instrument, the ditch a line of music written at the pace of shoulders. On a cool morning near the equinox, the prefect of the camp addresses the assembled cohort. He speaks without flourish about roads due for repair, culverts to be cleared before the spring rains think themselves eternal, and a bridge whose plank ends have chewed the feet of too many carts. His words lay a map across your season. Miles there, days here, a handful of nights under canvas. A return before sowing is done in the neighboring farms. The image is not a charge into glory. It is a list tied to places. You prefer it that way. A week later, you're out beyond the gate. The standard moves at the head like a small piece of sun on a pole. You feel your pack settle into its old truce with your bones. The morning is full of bird sound, the kind that makes fields look newer than they are. The road shows its winter, ruts softened, edges collapsed, a patch where water has insisted and won. Your sentry fans into work lines. Some men cut the shoulders square again. Others shovel gravel from a pile and tamp it until it behaves like stone. You join the crew resetting a low culvert. Hands brace a plank while the carpenter taps in pegs that smell faintly of pine sap. The water under the arch makes a small, pleased joke about weight and angle. By noon, the road accepts carts again as if that had always been its plan. Toward the end of spring, the cohort marches a 2-day loop to test the season's readiness. The drills you practiced are packed into real hours. March, halt, raised camp, cook, write, sleep, break camp, march again. There is a brief moment of noise at a village lane when 3 boys run alongside, shouting for attention. You give them a serious nod as if they are envoys from a famous city. They answer with the solemnity children can summon when treated as if they matter. The line keeps moving. The boys peel away. The evening falls across canvas like a hand that blesses rather than silences. You return to the fort thinner and stronger. The bathhouse welcomes your shoulders with steam and a wooden ladle. You wash dust from places the dust loved. In the dressing room afterward, you rub oil into tired skin and think, not of battles, but of the steady negotiation between a body and its work. Spring has put the terms in writing. You sign with a good night's sleep. Summer enters like a bright coin slipped into your palm warm. Simple, useful. The days grow longer without asking permission. You are sent to a small outpost along a river road, to barracks, a storehouse, a watchtower, a square of fence that is more suggestion than threat. The road it watches threads between low hills, the kind the wind rolls over without changing its tone. Your cohort splits. One sentry goes north to mend milestones. Yours goes south to keep company with merchants and listen for trouble that prefers not to carry its own weight. Life at an outpost is a repetition composed of small variations. Each morning, a pair of men rides a mile beyond the tower and back again, the horses picking out the firmest line along the verge. Each afternoon, 2 men walk the road to the next marker stone, trace the numerals with a finger, and return with a note for the clerk. The number stands. The weeds are cleared. The base is sound. The rest of the day folds around those anchors. You tidy a ditch, oil a hinge, count grain, sharpen a shovel that someone used as if it were a pry bar, and teach a recruit how to keep the edge of his blade without thinning it into vanity. Heat changes the sound of things. Leather lowers its voice. Nails in sandals conduct heat up into bones that have learned to ignore it. The river speaks more loudly because the air wants its coolness. You drink more posca and think better of it than you do in winter. Evenings become generous. There is light enough to write a full page to a friend in another unit, light enough to mend the seam in your cloak where it will matter in November, light enough to stand still by the fence and watch swallows perform the neat geometry they have practiced since Rome was only mud and intention. There is one morning when rumor wriggles under the fence like a small, quick animal. A pair of wagons arrives with drivers who keep glancing behind them. They report a band of men beyond the third hill who do not look like farmers and who asked for directions without caring what the answer was. The Optio sends a runner to the tower. The trumpet sounds 2 notes, low and close. Your sentry forms not into a parade but into a shape that discourages unwise ideas. Files angled to cover the lane, a few shields planted where carts would need to turn. 2 men on the slope above with eyes that measure direction more than distance. No one appears. The road holds its breath and then exhales. You wait through 1 patient hour, the kind that teaches new recruits the difference between alertness and imagination. When merchants pass again later with nothing to add, the shape dissolves. Not into relief, but into a return to the posture of ordinary care. The trumpeter cleans his instrument as if it is a cup. Someone makes a poor joke about thieves who hate heat. The joke doesn't need to be good. It only needs to make space for the breath everyone had been holding. Traveling inspection arrives from the fort in the person of a tribune with a tidy face. He looks into corners without moving objects, speaks to the clerk in a tone that assumes competence, and asks you about the culvert you repaired in spring with the kind of detail that proves he read the report. You show him the patch. He nods. He says nothing about glory and everything about schedules. Before he leaves, he asks after the recruits by name. The recruits stand taller for 3 days, because a man from maps has learned their syllables. The hottest week of summer is given to roadwork that asks more of patience than of muscle. You reset a section of paving stones that winter lifted and carts re-argued into a puzzle. You and 3 others pry them up, brush away soil, set the bed with gravel, then relay the stones in a pattern that looks like common sense in disguise. When the first cart crosses and does not complain, the road tells you you are right. The driver says nothing, which is payment enough. By the end of summer, your hands have changed. The nails are clean but broken, the palms polished by wood, the fingers educated by tools that reward exact pressure and punish noise. You keep 1 small blister under a strip of linen like a private story. No one remarks on it because everyone has one. The outpost smells of grain, leather, and smoke, the way a useful building should. When orders arrive to return to the fort, you feel the small tug that any place earns by being cared for. The march back is an easy day with a pack that feels lighter because the road is known. You pass the culvert you reset in spring. Water slides through without argument. You do not stop to admire it. You glance once and let the glance be enough. The gate of the fort opens like an old friend turning aside to let you in. The bathhouse steam feels like a welcome from a place that keeps its own kind of ledger. Autumn brings a calm that smells like apples and iron. Farmers stack cut grain in careful cones that look like prayers. You are assigned to a detail that escorts wagons between fields and the granary. The work is not to fight, it is to be seen. The presence of men in uniform makes roads behave. You ride at a walk, talk very little, and make a shape with your body that says, carry on. Once, at a crossroads, you help a wheel off a rut with your shoulder. The farmer thanks you with half a loaf that tastes of warm stone. The thanks is as much for not asking for more. On a slate-colored morning, the cohort holds a small court in the yard. 2 men from the village present a dispute about a boundary marker that drifted down a slope in heavy rain. You go with the centurion to recruits and a measuring cord. The stone lies in grass like a sheep that forgot its flock. You find the socket where it sat, reset it, stamp earth around its base, and scratch a mark on the nearest trunk to guide a future argument back to sanity. The tribunal records nothing impressive. The men shake hands. A child watching from the lane learns what adults look like when they fix something without noise. This is the empire at its best. Not banners, but agreements. By mid-autumn, you've been moved to the workshop wing for 3 weeks of maintenance. Armor racks get reorganized so everyone can find what they need in the dark. Spears are inspected, heads repinned, shafts oiled and turned so they do not warp. A clatter of ringlets from a male shirt being laid out for cleaning becomes a kind of music. You and a friend clean rust from a helmet so old that its dents have their own weather. Under the rust, the steel still takes a shine, and under the shine, the line of the visor still fits the human face that once wore it. You feel the presence of a man you never met and offer him, without words, the courtesy of making his tool good again. Cold arrives as a new kind of discipline. Breath shows itself, water grows stingy. The ground takes longer to forget night. Drills move under the colonnade where the floor keeps its temper. You warm hands before you lift a shield because cold leather lies about its weight. The cook lengthens stews with beans that swell into patience. You add a second twist of vinegar to your cup and decide the taste is better in winter. Winter at the fort is a catalogue of useful smallness. The armorer teaches 3 recruits to set rivets straight and not trust their first idea of square. The surveyor walks the inner wall with you and counts paces between watch points, then redraws a chart to match the truth instead of the original wish. The clerk asks for help carrying ledger boards to the storehouse, because numbers become heavier when grain sits behind them. You sweep a barracks floor not because it is your job, but because a broom pushed steadily through straw is a good way to rest without stopping. There is one alarm in the dark month, the kind that proves the system rather than the soldiers. A sentry hears something he cannot name and gives 3 soft blows on a horn. The watch changes posture. Men stand. Torches are set in brackets. The gate team lifts the bar and lowers it again to learn how it feels under hands that are not quite warm. You walk the inner path with the optio, both of you listening for a shape that is not wind. Nothing presents itself. The night grows ordinary again. In the morning, the commander praises the sentry for being wrong in the right direction. On a day of bright cold, you accompany a small pay chest to a nearby posting where men have not seen coins since the last harvest. The pay clerk speaks names in a tone that turns syllables into respect. Each man receives coins in a shallow dish, signs a tablet or leaves a mark, and steps aside with a smile that reaches his eyes but not his voice. Money is not the point. Trust is. A boy sweeping the threshold hums a tune that has only 2 notes. You find yourself humming it later without noticing. As the year thins into its last weeks, you read back through your own small tablet of notes. The entries are brief. New nails, left sandal, culvert held, letter from Flaccus's sister married, oil the hinge at Southgate, remember waxed thread. None of these would take a line in a history. Together they make a life sturdy enough to stand. On the final evening of the old year, the cohort gathers in the Principia. A priest says a prayer that is more about steadiness than triumph. The commander thanks men by name who taught, who mended, who noticed. You are surprised to hear yours among them for the culvert, which had felt like nothing at all at the time. After the words, there is bread sweeter than usual, and a small ladle of wine with spice. The room smells briefly like a ship about to leave. You walk the perimeter once more before sleep. The wall holds. The gate bar sits snug. The watchfire breathes without smoke, and the stars are arranged as if someone who liked order put them there. You touch the stone lightly with your palm and feel its cold answer. The empire is not the wall. The empire is the habit of checking it. Back in your bunk, cloak pulled high, you think of spring without longing and of summer without dread. You think of roads that remember your feet, of ditches that learned a better direction, of men who will travel safer because a culvert did its quiet job. You are a soldier in an army famous for war. What you did this year was keep the world from needing one. Sleep finds you quickly, as it does on nights when the ledger closes with numbers that add morning will come. The oath will be spoken again when it should be. The road will go on being a line that can carry people from one place to another. You will lift the pack, find the old balance, and begin another year that looks like sense. And if you forget any of this in the depth of winter, the whistle will remind you one small sound, enough to gather a day. If you want to hear a legionary speak across centuries, don't look for speeches. Look for lists. Look for small requests, brief notices, and the ordinary handwriting of someone leaning on a table at the end of a long day. The ancient world left its voice not only in marble but in wood, wax, and scraps of papyrus that were never meant to last. And yet they did. Imagine a thin wooden tablet, 2 leaves hinged with twine, the surface inside filled with dark wax, smooth flat, and written with a pointed stylus. The letters are quick and careful at once, the kind a tired hand makes when it still wants to be understood. Send more socks, one line might say. Another, grant leave for my birthday, written with the formal politeness a junior uses when speaking to rank. A fragment of a duty roster follows names paired with small tasks. The gate at 2nd watch, the grain store at 3rd, the bath furnace at dawn. Nothing dramatic, everything necessary. There are accounts that read like the breath of a camp. Oil issued to mend shields, nails for sandals, hobnails, counted by hundreds. Because miles eat iron, a jar of vinegar to be stretched into posca for the sentry posted beyond the south gate. Wages recorded as a sum, then chipped away by deductions that every soldier recognizes. Food, clothing, equipment, the small fees that keep common life tidy. You can feel the shrug behind certain lines and the quiet satisfaction behind others. A bonus shared after a long march. A replacement cloak entered at cost but carried proudly out of the store. Letters home are softer. They circle ordinary concerns the way a hand circles warmth near a hearth. A greeting to a mother with the old phrases that never wear out. A request that someone check on a boundary marker, because even far away a son worries about a path that might wander. A note about a friend transferred to another unit who sends his love to a woman at a baker's stall. A reminder that sandals wear out faster than anyone expects. Sometimes a scrap of hope. I will come if the gods permit. Sometimes a scrap of news. We have enough grain. Do not sell the mule. The words are simple. Their persistence is the miracle. Commands and reports survive too. A centurion writes in a steady hand that the ditch along the east wall was cleared and that the soil piled neatly against the berm, as ordered. A patrol returns with a brief description of a bridge whose planks should be replaced before autumn. A small roll records the distribution of rations on a festival day. Each mess given a little extra olive oil and a handful of dried fruit. We learn from this that kindness was not rare. It was scheduled when possible and improvised when needed. Together these scraps make a chorus that is easy to fall asleep to, not because it is dull, but because it is trustworthy. The paper voice of a soldier is the voice of someone who has understood that a life is made of repeated small agreements. I will show up. I will carry my share. I will return what I borrow. I will write down what I did, so someone else can begin where I left off. In the quiet of a long evening, that voice feels close. It does not insist, it simply continues. Archaeology lets you walk through a camp that is no longer there. Start with the ground plan. A permanent fort is a rectangle with rounded corners, like a door someone softened so it won't catch. The main streets cross at right angles, one from gate to gate, another from gate to gate, the other way. At their meeting sits the headquarters building, the Principia, with a courtyard where orders were posted and a shrine where standards rested. Around this center stand barracks in ranked lines, storehouses with raised floors to keep out damp, a granary that smells faintly of dust even in memory. The bathhouse lies just outside the wall or tucked into a corner where heat can be managed and water coaxed into service. If you stand at the gate in imagination and look inward, you can feel order lean toward you. Ditches are perdan, inner and an outer cut in clean V-shapes that hold rain and trouble at a respectful distance. The wall above them was once timber or stone, depending on a commander's budget and a legionnaires' habits. Towers punctuated the curtain not to impress but to see. Inside, small workshops clustered where noise could be useful, a smithy with a floor blackened by hammer scale, a carpenter's shed with a drift of curls like a soft tide along the threshold, a space where leather was cut and stitched in long morning light. Marching camps are briefer but no less elegant. They appear in the soil as darker stains where ditches once ran. From above, archaeologists trace the ghost of a square, the breaks where gateways opened, the faint signatures of tents laid out in precise lines. Stakes leave little to find. Ropes leave nothing, but the pattern is faithful. For gates, for streets, the command tent near the center, and each contubernium granted its rectangle of earth to own for a single night. The camp's edge is a line the world learns to respect even when the wall is only a thought supported by a ditch. In places where the army stayed long, refused pits tell stories no scribe bothered to write. Layers of broken pottery from cups and cooking pots. Bones from meals that say more about diet than any boast. Nails, so many nails from sandals that walked their usefulness into the earth. a constellation of iron that maps miles without showing a single road. You can close your eyes and hear the clatter of a jar breaking, the small laugh that follows. The broom whose job is to make the break disappear into order again. The artifacts of work outnumber the artifacts of war by an honest margin. Spade heads worn thin by rock and repetition. Hammer stones with a flat side that learned its duty. Tent pegs smoothed by weather and cleaned by hands that needed them to bite, while the next night, a stylus lost at the edge of a street where someone paused to write and then was called away. Each object is a sentence that begins with "someone was careful here." When archaeologists map a fort and its surroundings, they find the world a soldier made beyond the wall. Roads meet like firm handshakes at the gate. A civilian settlement grows where trade and families follow pay. Small altars sit where someone thanked a god for a minor rescue, the kind of rescue that keeps a day from becoming a story. Wells are stoned round and still sweet. Fields show furrows that learned a new direction. When the army taught water a better habit, the geometry of safety expands quietly. One ditch, one culvert, 1 mile at a time. Between the things the ground returns and the words it preserves, there is another layer. The pictures people made while the legion still marched. On stones, on walls, in mosaics that survived under floors, artists set down scenes from a life they knew. A soldier stands with shield at rest, not lifted. His cloak folds in lines a sculptor could not invent without having watched cloth drape over a tired shoulder. The helmet's cheek pieces curve to a face, not a mannequin's skull. You can trust these details. They were made in a world where someone would have noticed if they were wrong. Later images, made after the legions had gone, sometimes grow grander and less exact. The sword lengthens in memory. The armor stiffens into something too heavy for work. The soldier becomes a symbol first, a person second. That is how stories adapt themselves to public use. It does not make them lies. It makes them lanterns for different rooms. When you hold the image up beside the shovel and the hobnail, you see how the light should be trimmed, less blaze, more glow. Myths gather wherever effort is quiet. The notion that a legionary day was a march from one heroic moment to another belongs to the way we tell stories when we need endings. The ground and the lists teach another way. Days stacked like bricks, each aligned so the wall does not wander. The drama, if you want to call it that, lives in the decision to set a line square, to pack a trench, to oil a hinge, to carry a little more than your share because the man beside you limps. These choices do not stand out from a distance. They hold everything that does. There are symbols that grew honest roots. The eagle's standard was a focus, not because bronze is magical, but because men chose to believe together. A shared object lets many hands point in the same direction. The oath, spoken each year, mattered because repetition gives language the weight of furniture. You lean on it without needing to think. The bathhouse, ordinary as it sounds, knit a garrison into a single body warmth. Cleaning, talk, small jokes, traveling through steam like light through fog. Culture is what gathers where habits meet kindness. If you walk a museum today and stop in the cases that display the quiet things, the stylus, the shoe, the spoon, you can feel the discipline that underwrote the more famous objects. The gladius earned songs, the spoon earned sleep. Both were carried, both did their work. The difference is only in how loudly we remember them. So the mystery of the legionary is not how he fought. That is a smaller question than the ground invites us to ask. The mystery is how a life of practiced smallness built roads that are still under highways, drains that still lead water where it ought to go. Towns that once grew because a unit's pay spilled into bread and shoes and lamp oil. We stand on that quiet work without noticing. The noticing, when it comes, is gentle. It does not demand awe. It suggests gratitude. You can end this day of learning by picturing a simple thing. A line cut in earth at dusk, straight enough that tomorrow's wall will not argue with it. A man lays his shovel down, steps back, and nods once, not in pride, not in relief, just in agreement with the task. He drinks a little posca, wipes his mouth with the back of his hand, and returns to his tent. The sky has already begun to show its first cautious stars. He does not need them to guide him. The ditch will do, the rope will do, the habit will do, and tomorrow the whistle will sound once, and he will begin again. Picture a quiet morning in the Principia, the headquarters building at the center of a fort. The light falls through a row of arches and paints the floor in pale rectangles. On one side, a clerk smooths a wax tablet with the back of a warm knife. On the other, a standard stands in its niche, bronze catching a slow breath of sun. Between these anchors of routine walks a man whose presence arranges the day without raising his voice, the centurion. A centurion is not simply a louder soldier, he is a hinge. He turns between orders from above and the needs from below, translating plans into steps men can take with boots and shoulders. He carries the vine staff, the traditional symbol of his authority, not as a threat, but as an emblem of the responsibility that sits across his back from dawn to sleep. He knows every name in his century. He knows which recruit keeps his gear to neat, because he is afraid of being noticed, and which veteran lets his straps go dry when he worries about a sister in town. He notices feet more than faces, because feet tell the truth about miles. When he walks the line at first light, boots shift, shields tilt, and the ill-fitting edges of a day tuck themselves in. Pay marks the difference between his world and a ranker's, but not as dramatically as myth imagines. The centurion earns more coin and more worry. He has a room with a door and a place at certain tables. He also bears the weight of outcomes that will never be written under his name. His mail is better, his helmet lined with care, his cloak heavier when winter decides to test gatekeepers. At the same time, his ledger is not a private luxury, it's a public promise. When rations run thin, he is the one who breaks larger loaves into fairer halves. When a ditch must be finished at dusk, he is the one who measures the remaining span and divides it into 3 quiet tasks that can be done without resentment. For the ordinary soldier, the world is narrower but not mean. He measures success in small, honest units, a day marched without a blister growing, a tent raised square the first time, a pair of sandals repaired before the nails began to whisper about leaving. He does not decide routes or rosters. He decides whether to oil a strap now or hope the strap forgives neglect tomorrow. His pay is steady, though it trickles deductions for food and clothing, small charges that keep common life tidy. A festival bonus brightens his month like a lamp set on a low table. He counts coins, saves a few, and spends the rest on bread a little better than usual, or a letter carried to a town where someone he loves measures time by his returns. Between these two levels, centurion and ranker walk figures who make the army feel like a household. The optio, the centurion's second, is a kind of tuning fork. When the line ripples, he hums the right note until it steadies. The signifer carries the standard and the pay chest. He wears a pelt that turns heads on market day and a seriousness that does not. The corniceon holds a curved horn that speaks and commands. Even men at the rear can hear as shape rather than noise. None of these men shine the way statues shine. They shine the way tools shine, polished by use and by hands that respect what they can do. Discipline belongs in this picture, but gently. The legion's order is not kept by shouting. It is kept by habits, taught early and maintained in small, predictable ways. A centurion's correction is often a sentence, not a spectacle. Move the peg to hands wider. Your line will hold in wind. A punishment, when it comes, is described in euphemisms and carried out in daylight, with witnesses and measure. The point is not to make fear. It is to make tomorrow safer for the man corrected and for the men who walk beside him. Even refusals of mercy are recorded with neat script and formal words, because law that is written is less likely to wander. At the top of this structure stand officers who breathe a different air. A tribune arrives with a clean cloak and an education in maps. He asks for reports, speaks Greek to a merchant, and writes a letter with elegant loops that travel to a governor's desk. He lives in rooms that remember conversation rather than smoke, and he may dine with local elites to turn risk into cooperation. Yet even he depends on the calm of men whose names the paper does not bother to hold. The centurion who keeps the line from fraying. The clerk whose figures never embarrass the command. The quartermaster who knows which barrel of grain should be opened next because he tasted the one before. Rank and file form a single piece of cloth. The weave is tight because each strand understands its neighbors. The contrast is really, you can see it at supper. An officer's table holds better bread, a softer cheese, and a cup that tastes of wine rather than vinegar. A ranker's bowl holds lentils that remember the heat of the fire, and a slice of pork that forgives the day for being long. Yet both rooms are warmed by the same decisions taken in the morning. Where to post a guard, where to cross a stream, when to let men rest before the pack settles into complaint. The army is a society in miniature. Its justice is visible, not perfect, not cruel, always tethered to the blunt fact that the road will need all of them tomorrow. Behind the ranks and the officers are crafts that keep the whole machine humane. If you walk the inner street of a fort with attention, you can hear these professions at work even when their doors are closed. A rhythm of tapping from the smithy, a soft crackle from the bathhouse furnace, the small hiss of a kettle in the valetudinarium, the hospital where water is kept ready for hands that need to be clean. The medics are not magicians. They are careful. Their tools are simple on a table that has seen more than one season. Bronze tweezers, needles, clamps, a scalpel kept sharp against cloth, rolls of linen wound like clouds that will soon be taught to lie flat. Shelves hold jars with strong scent vinegar, wine, honey, rendered fat. A few herbs a doctor trusts for easing breath or quieting a restless gut. A triage does not look like drama. It looks like listening. A man sits. A medic asks where the ache lives. Fingers learn what words hide. A blister is cleaned and dressed with bland kindness. An infection is met with patience and baths. A fever is escorted through its hours with cool cloths, and the insistence that water taken often is a medicine in its own right. When wounds from work or weather arrive, the language stays soft. Edges are brought together. Pressure is applied. Sleep is invited. The hospital smells of soap and boiled linen. Men leave with gratitude that is larger than the little room can hold. Next to care comes calculation. Surveyors and engineers walk with cords, rods, and a talent for noticing slope. They decide where a ditch will spare the road a month of sorry puddles. They show recruits how to square a corner with a rope knotted into ratios that make geometry a thing you can pull tight. They love culverts the way poets love lines that scan when they place a small footbridge over a trickle that became a nuisance. The camp stops tripping on the same problem, and the whole garrison moves more like a single animal. Their drawings are not glamorous. They are true. A peg driven in the right place slows chaos in a way speeches cannot. Artisans knit comfort into the structure. The smith turns iron into obedience. Shoes that fit hooves and favor tendons. Hinges that swing and then keep swinging. Strap ends that do not cut. Buckles that accept holes without tearing the tongue. He complains that last season espars were soft and nods when told the factor will choose better. His fire is a center of gravity on cold days. Men drift toward it and leave warmer, even if they came only to watch. Nearby, a leather worker keeps the army's second skin alive. He oils straps until they look like argument made flexible. He cuts new pieces from hides that were chosen for grain and scent, and he stitches with a rhythm that listens to breath. If you bring him a belt with a crack, he taps it with a finger. Hears how far the damage has traveled and says not yet or now with the calm of a man who has saved 100 items from breaking in the moment they were most needed. Clerks and quartermasters make sure the right thing is in the right place when a hand reaches. Their art is invisibility. They move sacks by numbers that add turnkeys at hours that make sense. Swap out a damaged tent panel before anyone has to sleep under its lie. A good storehouse looks like modest wealth. Rows of grain raised above damp. Stacks of oil jars that don't leak. A corner where sandals, sorted by size, wait for feet. When a clerk jokes that sandals eat nails faster than mules eat oats, he is not wrong, and his ledger has the figures to prove it. At the edge of the fort, the bathhouse lays a warm hand on the garrison's tired shoulders. Water moves from furnace to pool, from hot to warm to cool, teaching muscles to unclench and minds to forgive. Scrapers lift the dust of the week from skin. Oil replaces what wind took. Talk travels in low voices through steam. It is a public kindness disguised as a building. Men leave cleaner and less lonely. All of these professions are quiet because their successors erase themselves. A wound that heals is no longer a story by the time it is done. A bridge that does not fail is taken for granted. A strap that never snaps is a problem that never got its chance. Yet these quiet victories are the reason the army can ask for miles without apology. Specialists turn effort into continuity. Continuity turns fear into fatigue, which is easier to sleep away. Step outside the gate on a market day and you will see another kind of army, one that does not march, yet follows wherever forts grow. A civilian settlement, a vicus, gathers like a shawl around the military. Its lanes curve a little where the fort's geometry insists on straight. Its houses lean close to one another as if sharing warmth. Here, the contrast between soldier and civilian softens into exchange. Bakers rise before first light and send loaves into the world that tastes of fine flour on paydays and coarser grain when money must last. A woman with a stall sells olives and sits with a patience that learned to ignore weather. Children run with the courage of those who know many adults will answer to a shout. A blacksmith who is not the army's smith shoes a mule for a farmer, then sells a handful of nails to a signifer who prefers his own supply. A potter displays cups with rims that fit a soldier's fingers better than the coarse issue ware. He smiles when a centurion buys two and doesn't haggle. Some soldiers have families, hairwives and all, but the most cautious paperwork. Children who learn their letters at the edge of a booth where a scribe writes petitions for those who fear the Principia's threshold. The law may frown at certain arrangements. Life prefers what works. A man off duty sits on a low stool and mends a toy cut from scrap wood. His daughter climbs his knee, then moves to chase a dog. A neighbor calls a greeting across the lane without standing. This is not the empire of maps. It is the empire of breadlines and shared water. Traders bring the world in small boxes. A bolt of dyed cloth from far away becomes 3 cloaks that will be admired on cold mornings. A jar of sauce from a distant province appears at an officer's table and makes a conversation begin about taste and memory. A packet of pins travels from a stall to the hospital, where skilled hands turn them into closures for bandages that want to stay put. The garrison SP moves through these booths like a tide that rises gently twice a month and ebbs with a sigh of satisfaction. Economics here is simply trust with weights attached. On certain evenings, the boundary between fort and town all but disappears. A musician with a lyre stands near the gate and plays the 3 tunes every region recognizes, and to that belong only to his village. A group gathers without plan. A soldier hums and finds the melody by feel. A trader claps time with a palm against a barrel. A child falls asleep against a mother's shoulder with the unembarrassed confidence of the well-guarded. When the light thins, the musician nods, the crowd melts, and the gate closes with a bar that meets its sockets without complaint. Contrast returns when you visit an officer's quarters and then a ranker's tent on the same afternoon. The officer's room holds a chair that learned comfort, a chest with 2 good shirts folded flat, a small shelf of books, perhaps a geography, perhaps poems, perhaps a manual on siegecraft that is better at pleasing the mind and training the hands. The ranker's tent holds for sleeping places, a ground cloth that stays dry because someone keeps it so, and a pack in the corner with tools set in the same order every night to prevent morning confusion. The difference is not only comfort, it is time. An officer has more of it to think with. A ranker has learned to think in the small pockets that routine forgives. Pay maps the gap gently. A centurion can buy the better cloak this winter and still send money to a parent in town. A ranker chooses between 2 decent pairs of sandals and a jar of oil to share among 4 messmates. Both choices are honest. Neither is desperate, not when the unit runs as it should. Hardship arrives when supply stumbles or when orders stretch miles beyond habit. On those days, the townspeople become the fort's breath. A baker extends credit. A trader delays payment. A priest lends a room for stores until the granary's roof is mended. The wall looks like stone. It is also community. What, then, is the social picture from far enough away to be soothing? Imagine 3 rings. At the center, the line of soldiers and the officers who steer them discipline, lists, drills, and decisions. Around them, the specialists who convert those decisions into comfort healers, smiths, engineers, clerks. Outside the vicus and the road families, shopkeepers, travelers, and fields that accept seed because ditches lead water where it is welcome. The rings are porous. A child becomes a recruit. A veteran marries and opens a stall. A clerk's nephew learns to write and finds a place in the Principia. Lives pass in and out. The fort keeps its shape while the people change. At night, after the market closes and the lamps are put away, the world goes quiet in layers. The fort's watch steps move like commas along a sentence. The town's last door shuts with a wooden click. A dog mutters, then folds into sleep. If you stand just outside the ditch and listen, you hear a hum that is not quite sound. The hum of arrangements that hold until morning. This is the contrast worth learning, not glory against drudgery, not rank against rank, but solitude against belonging. The legionary endures because he is inside a web that catches and steadies him. The officer leads because he, too, is caught and steadied, though his web is woven from different threads. You can let that picture be the last one before the eyes grow heavy. 3 rings breathing together under a mild sky. Somewhere in the Principia, A lamp is left on a low table. Somewhere in the vicus, a woman turns a loaf on a shelf so tomorrow's first slice will be right. Somewhere in a quiet tent, a soldier rolls a strip of cloth around a heel and ties a knot he could tie in the dark. The empire is not a roar. It is this people arranged around a task, each answering with what they have, each falling asleep a little less alone than they would have been without the others.